I'm Valentina Pachon. I'm like NFT acquisition manager at Crypto.com, NFTs.
I'm Tayodamnshoes. I'm an artist and also a project manager of over 2 projects in the NFT space.
I'm Conlan Rios, CEO and founder of Async Art.
My name is Sach, like such a nice guy, from 1204 Labs.
Okay, so I'm going to be the moderator. I'm going to ask these experts about generative art, and I hope you learned a lot from this. So Conlan, Async is leading the generative art and music scene. Can you please tell us more about the programmable art movement?
Sure. So to start, when Async launched in February 2020, we took a different approach to tokenized art in that, most platforms at the time were letting you tokenize a static piece of art. And we took the approach of letting the creator deconstruct their work into layers and tokenizing individual layers for ownership. And so as an example, you might have a landscape painting of a cowboy riding across the desert. And so on Async Art, you would have tokenized, the background painting, and then the cowboy is a separate layer, and then maybe the sky is a third layer. So you would have a system of like someone owning the background, someone owning the cowboy, someone owning the sky. And when people own these layers, they could then alter the overall composition, by changing the state from states that were given to them by the creator at mint time. So the artist might have provided a day state of the background, a night state, a rainy day state. Maybe the cowboy would have different outfits or costumes or poses. And so, we call this programmable art because once you own that layer token, you could then alter, the overall composition with it. And you could change it, whenever your artistic whim called for it. You could hook it up to a server, so like the background changed with the day and night of your own locale. Maybe the background would change with the stock market volatility. It was really open-ended. And so by taking that approach to layers, it allowed us to watch the market and see where it was going. And at the end of 2020 and throughout 2021, generative art began to take off. And for those that are new, like generative art is a different approach to art where rather than tokenize the finished product, the artist provides the parameters for how the art will evolve and be generated, whether it's an algorithm or whether it's just like a set of rules. And so our approach to layered art allowed us to also offer generative art tools for creators, so that now what we're offering is the ability for people to buy generated versions of their layered artwork. So in that example I just gave earlier about the cowboy riding across the desert, there's 2 approaches you could take. There's a programmable art approach, which is people owning the layers, and there's a generative art approach where you could say, hey, maybe no one owns the layers, but instead they buy a randomly generated edition of like background A, cowboy B, sun state C. And so, yeah, that's been our, that allowed us to move into the generative art space.
Why is important the one-on-one connection with the artist, and how we can get this through generative art? Tell us about why in your community, this is for you, Conlan, sorry. Tell us about why it's called community art.
Well, with generative art, it allows people who buy this art to have a unique, personalized version that's just for them. So if I'm a creator and I do a one-of-one piece, okay, one creator can own it, but you're limited to just that one creator. If I do a piece and I have 500 editions, okay, now you can have 500 people own it, but again, they're having the 500 of that same static edition. And so with generative art, you could have 500 editions, and now not only do 500 people own it, but they own like their own unique version of the art. So it's more personalized. The connection is still maintained between them and the creator. It's one-to-one.
Sach, how 1204 Labs is allowing deeper connection between collectors, artists, and their NFTs?
Thanks, Valentina. So 1204 Labs fundamentally is our objective is to bring new emerging technologies that do not see art in their landscape at all, but where we see artistic potential and basically bring that into the art world. So that's conceptually what 1204 Labs is about. Now, the first such technology we have is a technology which, I mean, very simply put, allows us, through a wearable, to measure someone's emotional resonance real time. So, you know, it is a, yeah, we are basically measuring how open is someone to an external piece of stimuli, and then how is that external stimuli actually emotionally affecting them. And this is something we measure in a numerical form. And what we believe this allows us to do, or this coupled with the fact that, you know, we now have this new form of art, which is completely digital, which now can hold real value because of NFT and smart contracts and blockchains. We want to use this technology fundamentally to create the most personal connection, which is one's own emotions, with, you know, a piece of art. And to take that a step further, you know, historically, I would say art has been a one-way discourse, right? Where the artist creates the art, and then the art speaks to the viewer, their collector, in, you know, in whatever way that viewer receives it. But then it stops there, right? What we're trying to do, or what we're trying to enable, is taking that from being a one-way discourse into becoming a dialogue or a discussion. So the artist will create a piece of art, and we're specifically focusing on dynamic, programmable, generative art, because that's the most visually compelling use of this technology. So an artist will create a piece of art. That art, you know, will then, you know, a viewer will see that art. A viewer will be wearing, I mean, I'll keep it low tech, but will be wearing a device through which we can measure their emotional reaction to that art. We will take that measurement, feed it back to the art. It'll become the input into an algorithm or parameter changes or whatever that the artist will define. The art will change. It'll solicit a new set of emotions. So it's like a symbiotic relationship. And you know, this what we're trying to do is best done in the type of art forms that we're talking about here. You know, I mean, i.e. non-static art forms.
I want to first, I think this is related to you too. First, I want to know about your experience with generative art. But then I think it's very important if you tell us how generative art can help you with the creative experience.
Yeah, that's a good question. When I first started, I started off as a one-of-one artist, but then whenever I, you know, created my own trades and had it randomly generated with my developer, it was me hitting a different side of my brain. I got to see just how cool my art can look in different combinations. And especially like working with a coder, that's completely different. Like you usually by yourself working and just drawing and calling it a day, but working with a coder, you really get to work with a team and understand just how much goes into creating a generative art. Because it's not only just about the art, it's about the art, the marketing. It gives you a lot of experience that you wouldn't have just doing a regular one-of-one art, right? I would say that like it made me want to do more generative art because I just want to play with the different kind of traits that I could put into it. And you know, you could draw 200 traits and then you can come out with probably 1 million different versions of it. I think that's mind-blowing, you know, and it's art in itself. If you're working with a computer, that's like a whole different art form. And that's my experience with it. I loved it. It was amazing.
Yeah, definitely open like a bunch of opportunities, and you can like improve and see that there's like way more things to do.
Yeah.
Conlan and Sach, given the possibility of layering and making changes in the art through time and circumstances, how we can give it, how we can give more use to generative art pieces?
Yeah, so with generative art pieces, I think it goes back to the original vision for at least Async is that we wanted to enable new types of art forms that just weren't possible pre-blockchain. And so, with generative art, we really think that it's the answer to a lot of challenges that, like, musicians, for instance, are facing, where, they're trying to get that personal connection back that they've lost when they're trying to sell their music through Spotify and Pandora. They're reaching millions of listeners, but they have no way to connect to them. The music is exactly the same. And so with generative art, for instance, with music, that personalized song for every listener, that's a kind of an example of how we can offer new ways to reach their audiences. Yeah.
What about you, Sach?
So, the digital art, by virtue of being digital, gives us so many possibilities. And in our case, the first thing we're trying to do is build a very a clear bridge between, as I was saying, the most personal part of a viewer and its art, right? That not in a tangible form, but in a demonstrable form has never been possible. So at its basic level, I think we're creating a relationship or formalizing a relationship in a way that's never been done. Then the second level of what we're trying to do is we're making the viewer, the collector, a participant in the whole process, right? We're drawing them into, we're drawing them into the creative process of what art is. And I think for some, certainly from a viewer or from a collector perspective or a viewer perspective, that's awesomely exciting for me. It may not be for everybody. It may also not be for every artist, but that's the other thing. And look, at a much more philosophical level, and this is, let's say, a parallel track that we also want to have, is as my co-founder has articulated it, we've now found a way to make the invisible visible, right? I think if you extrapolate that out, I don't know, maybe somehow in when we put this technology in the hands of artists, they will find a way to make people really become in tune with their natural intelligence centers, right? Which is not just the mind, it's the heart, it's the gut, and I think that level of consciousness is going to be very important. But that's also a lot of intellectual gobbledygook. But sincerely, it is actually an important part of the journey that we are on and that we want to foster.
Yeah, I think if you have the possibility to change your NFT, let's say you buy it, and then you can participate in the changing of the layers, let's say, and then it's your NFT, and if it's part of a PFP collection, for example, you won't be selling that fast. The mentality of a flipper has no space here because it's your heart, your emotions. It's made for you. So this will, I think, lead the way to a better community, more engaged with projects that will make bigger and more stronger. So now that we are talking about PFPs, 2021 was the year of PFPs, and I want to know what is next in generative art. In your perspective, what we will see 2022-23.
I really think there's going to be more AI stuff. A lot of people have been experimenting with that. And not only that, I would say, I feel like more and more people are individually creating projects than, but people are also participating. But for me, what I see in the future is everybody will end up eventually having their own project, and that's their identification. And what I hope to see is us moving more towards the metaverse, because we've been creating it. I think it's time for us to not actually actively participate in the metaverse. And, with the projects, instead of seeing it as a Twitter spaces, you would actually see it walking and talking and actually having conversations in the metaverse. But that's how I see it, mainly AI and everyone having their own projects, which is cool.
Yeah, I think as PFPs are starting to slowly cool down, and everyone has 10 or 20 PFPs additions from these collections, they're going to start to scrutinize a bit more about each new PFP that comes out. They're going to look beyond just the initial like, okay, I'm going to acquire this, but what does it get me? So we actually think that like metaverse experiences will play into it. So for instance, like a musician may launch a PFP collection, but then that PFP collection may be your ticket into a virtual concert in a metaverse space, or a game, or maybe a part of a game that's gated to having a PFP. Um, you know, as well as unlocking, future airdrops or unlockables like merchandise. If I'm a musician and I launch PFP, like every 6 months, I might give you access to like limited edition merchandise like hoodies or sweaters or my new album. So yeah, we think that people are going to start looking for what comes next when they acquire their PFP this year.
I mean, so for me, I think the best thing has happened is this total collapse of the market that we've seen, because I think this is going to get rid of so much shit, and what you're going to see, like, this is a serious purge, and in my view, what we're going to now see is like it's all going to be about the creativity, in whatever form, be it PFPs, be it in whatever way you want, but it's going to be about that. I think if you look at the last 6 months, like I think every, I mean, like take PFP, but every project from conception, like everyone's thinking about how am I going to build my community, how am I going to monetize, that's not how people thought 12 months ago, right? It was like, it was about how am I going to do something really cool, and then it just kind of took off, and I'm actually, so to answer your question, what is 2022 going to be about? It's going to be about real kind of creativity again. It's going to be about pushing the boundaries of this new medium. And it's not going to be about, how do I ride this wave to make a quick buck in as smart of a way as possible, and, have this bullshit discussion with the crypto, dudes and native people, blah, 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 blah.
I want to add on to that. So I also think in the future it's going to be more about accountability for all the projects that are happening, making sure that what you say you're going to do, you actually do it. Because there's a lot of projects out there, and they're probably gonna weed themselves out, So like the ones that have been there from the beginning, that's been creating community from Clubhouse days or things like that are just consistently there. Like you say, we're going through a purge right now, so there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna leave, and the ones that are staying is how you know that they're actually building. So I feel like there's going to be definitely a lot of accountability, and we'll probably see more projects becoming companies, like let's say fashion-based companies, like if you own this, you're able to get this certain thing, but it will be more like easier, not so much. I don't think it will be so much like one-on-one Twitter Spaces type thing. I think it's going to be like just like a broader like. I don't know how to explain it, but I hope you guys get what I'm trying to say. But yeah.
No, totally. For me, like what it needs to improve in PFPs is like the quality of the collectors. I think this is like what you were saying. We know this opportunity of the crisis is like it will clean the space of flippers and people that like it's very bad on social media, and even when the drop is out, they are like putting low like. They're putting down the floor price of the drop, like basically destroying the drop. So I think this is an opportunity for like work in the community, educate people on the space, try to work on healthier and better communities, even happier, because people should see these projects as art, as beautiful, as inspirational, as like something that is good for their lives, and not just like to flip like quick money. This should like end.
And Valentina, I just want to add one more thing. The other two things that I think are that are interesting, that are happening, that are going to also shape 2022 is, one is that the offline art world, for good reasons and bad reasons, are for the first time acknowledging that digital art is is an art form, right? It's not some like poo-poo techno crap that they perceived it as. So I think that I think is it can be healthy. It can be healthy because I think it will lead to, you know, a critical discussion about what is art, right? What is good, what is bad, why, you know, all of that kind of stuff. That I think is healthy. The other thing which I think is interesting, and this is probably one of my big learnings here, was there's a big distinction between crypto art and NFT art, right? And at least the way it was defined to me is, so crypto art is done by these deeply ideologically driven people who are about decentralization, they're about democratization, they're about, you know, they're about these sacrosanct principles that we talked about, but they will not sell their soul, they will not compromise those principles to make a quick buck, which I think NFT artists have done, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because, you know, I think that discussion, which has gotten lost because NFTs took off so in such a crazy way, I think that discussion is going to come back to the forefront, and that I think is going to be very, very healthy. That's going to help the art form itself mature.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I hope you did the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.